Good evening. I'm going to call this Planning Commission to order. Today is Thursday. It is July 20th, and it is 6:31 p.m. So welcome. I'm going to start tonight with our roll call. I'll start with my right tonight.
Matthew Petrich.
Jane Garrison.
Shanna Collins.
Larry Crandall.
Nancy Anderson.
Roisin O'Farrell.
Okay, so there are 6 of us tonight. Next, I will move on to the approval of the agenda. I have a request. What I'd like to do this evening, if you look at the agenda, at the bottom, there's a section that's public comment, and it says agenda 7 minutes per person. And we do this when we have more than one item that's not a public hearing. And tonight we only have one public hearing, so we don't need to have an extra public comment section for the agenda item. So I would like a motion to eliminate the public comment section from that part of the agenda this evening, and with that amendment to approve the agenda.
Does the 7 minutes then get brought up to the first public comment?
Yes, what happens is the people will have an opportunity to speak during the public hearing, and they will have 7 minutes each.
So moved.
Oh, I had another amendment request too.
Yeah.
And that is.
Oh, let me second that amendment. I think the first one.
Well, what we could do is
Let's see what Nancy.
accept the agenda. Open it. Say that I approve the agenda, second, and then it's open for discussion.
You want to do that? Okay.
So,
I move we approve the agenda.
Second that motion.
and I have another amendment to add, and that is technically the old business is comprehensive plan amendment, environmental and conservative element, the utilities element, and the capital facilities element.
That's a good point.
And then another thing I was going to ask is another amendment, although I should wait to see if that one's seconded.
Well, I'll second the addition to the
That amendment?
that amendment. yes.
Okay. And then I would like to add a new business item. Specifically, I'd like to ask if we could have a discussion item added to the agenda, the text amendment process, both what's taken place and what is to come.
You mean with referring to the entire comp plan, or?
We've got another series of this happening again, and I have some very specific questions as to how this overall was handled this time around and what to anticipate.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if other commissioners have some input for that, not just specific to the capital.
Facilities element. Oh, Doug is here tonight. Okay, good. Hi, Mr. McIntyre.
Hi.
So I'll second that. Okay, so I guess.
Well, I guess I don't know where staff will go with this, but now I worry that we have opened another new business item that might entail public discussion afterwards.
It's not a hearing, though. It's a general discussion item. It's
Mr.
like a study
McIntyre,
session.
what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I think that is certainly within the Commission's authority to add an item for discussion, such as a little clarity on the text amendment process. I guess the question I would have is there anything specific that you would like to address? Or do you want to just open it up and kind of have a free form?
I have some specific items to bring up to start the discussion,
Sure.
but I'm also wondering if the rest of the commissioners could add their input as to how this went and what's to come.
Okay. Let's vote. Well, Larry brings up a good point. So you want to allow a public comment after that to talk about the new business item?
I think so. It's just a general discussion.
What do you think?
Let's defer to staff on that.
Yeah.
In terms of the question regarding striking the secondary public comment?
Yeah, do you think we need to have a public comment if we're going to have a second item?
Correct. I think that should remain if that is the case.
Okay. So let's do this. Let's start over. Yeah. What do we do? We rescind all the motions. And do we need to vote on that rescind? How about,
You just have to withdraw your amendment, then the two others remain.
okay. I will withdraw my amendment to remove the public comment section, and then we will have a new item, which will be new business, to talk about the text amendments. And that was it, right?
And then the adjustment, that old business.
Oh, right.
The comprehensive.
And the old business, the comprehensive plan amendments will include the utilities element, the capital facilities element, and what is it, some sort of environment element?
The
Environment and conservation element. Okay. Let's vote on that. In favor of approving the agenda with the said amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say no. And the amendment, or the agenda is approved with those two amendments, 6-0. So, good. All right.
Thank you.
And so let's move on to the approval of the minutes for July 6th, 2017.
Could I just make, last meeting I was not here, but I did let staff know I was not going to be here, but that wasn't brought up at the meeting when I viewed it online. So I just want that to be noted that I did make my excuses.
It was an excused absence.
Yes, as opposed to being tardy or neglectful.
We'll have it noted as an excused absence. That's good.
Thank you.
I would like to make a correction or an addition, I guess it would be, to page 2, the 5th paragraph from the bottom. When we asked about if developers have other options than retention, stormwater retention ponds, we were told that the ponds would be more natural looking. But we also heard that they could use vaults, and I think that needs to be added to the minutes.
Are there any other suggested amendments? I'll take a motion to approve the minutes with Jane's correction.
So moved.
I second that motion to approve.
All of those in favor of improving the minutes from July 6, 2017 with the said correction, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. And the minutes are approved 6-0. So now we will move on to the public comment period. This is the non-agenda section of the public comment period. So anyone who would like to speak on a general item other than the comprehensive plan amendments that we will be speaking about tonight during the public hearing, this is your chance to speak, and you would have 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to speak during this time? No? Okay, so I will close the public comment period for now, and we will begin old business, which, like we just said, is the comprehensive plan amendments to the utilities element, the capital facilities element, and the environment and, what is it?
Conservation.
Environment and conservation element. I wanted to kind of let the commissioners know how this will go tonight, just so we can have a heads up. We will have the staff presentation. We will our staff will take comments and questions from the commission on the presentation. So after the presentation will be your time to ask questions, if you have comments, kind of just get things clear. Then I will open the public hearing. We will have the public come up and speak if they like. Like I said, up to 7 minutes per person. I will close the public hearing. Then we will have a main motion to approve the text amendments. And then we'll ask for a second. Then we can deliberate once we have a second. If anyone wants to make an amendment to these text amendments at that time, that is the time to actually propose an amendment. Then we will vote on all of those we will vote on each amendment separately. Then we will go up to the main motion and approve the main motion with those amendments. And we'll vote, and then we'll be finished. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up so that you know when it's appropriate to ask questions, to do comments, and when it's appropriate to do the actual amendments, if you have any. So with that, I will turn it over to staff. I have Mr. McIntyre and Ms. Pastone.
Thank you, Planning Commission. My name is Doug McIntyre. I'm a senior planner with the Department of Community Development. To my right is Cheryl Passon. We were here in front of you on July 6th discussing the same item. So this is the version that incorporates the input that we received from you on the 6th. And okay, as we've always started out these meetings, this is the second docketed item. So this covers the utilities element, the environment and conservation element, and the capital facilities plan. You've seen this slide probably 4 times now, and it's just a good way to start out because I think it's always helpful to reiterate the process that we've gone through. Back at the end of 2016, after our application period closed, which happens on September 30th every year, we took all the applications that were submitted on time, which in the 2016 round were 8 amendments, and then we present to the Planning Commission and City Council the quote-unquote applications for the docket, and it essentially acts as a filter to set the docket. And last year, 2 amendments were put on the docket. So that really led into what we're doing now, which is the full-on legislative review of those 2 amendments. And for this element, that legislative review process started in July. As I mentioned earlier, the July 6th meeting 2 weeks ago, we talked about the proposed amendment to all 3 elements, the capital facilities plan, utilities, and environment and conservation elements. The role of the Planning Commission is to review the amendments and ultimately make a recommendation to City Council to take action on the amendments. Once that happens, and as this graphic shows, coming up in September, we will move the conversation from Planning Commission to City Council. And at that point, City Council will review, hold their own public hearing, and propose amendments potentially, and then hopefully adopt the comprehensive plan amendment. Again, I kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but the role is to really help us ensure accuracy, ensure everything makes sense and is clean and easy to understand. So that's really a really important process, and we do appreciate the input that we receive from the Commission. I think every time it makes the documents that we deal with stronger. You also saw this last time, so I apologize again. However, I think it's an important slide to discuss the ways in which the comprehensive plan can be amended. There are 2 really distinct ways that the comprehensive plan can be amended. One is through what we're doing now, the annual amendment, and the other is through what we call the periodic update, and that happens every 8 years. And that's, again, a very comprehensive approach to updating the comprehensive plan. You look at changes in state law, you look at changes in the economy, changes in the market, changes in demand, changes in growth strategies, changes in policy direction, et cetera. That is part of a council-adopted work plan, which is a very specific action taken by council to set the schedule for review, set the topics for review, as well as set milestones in the process. So it's a very, very formal process. And again, this is a policy level update. And again, what we're doing now, the annual amendment process, the second way to amend the comp plan is done every year. We accept applications from the public as well as departments or other agencies to amend the comprehensive plan. Generally speaking, they're targeted amendments. They're usually narrowly focused, and a lot of times we deal with site-specific amendments. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we set the docket through this process, and that is the first filter. What makes it through? What is worthy to be reviewed further? And I'd like to always think of this as in terms of improving the implementation side of the comprehensive plan. Again, the comprehensive plan is a broad document, but it's also a specific document in some regard. And so it relates to broad policy, but also specific action items that the city undertakes. And the reason why we're amending under this second docket item, the 3 elements, utilities element, environment and conservation element, and capital facilities plan, is that it's really the last legislative step needed to implement the plans that were adopted at the end of 2016. There were 4 actions that the City Council took to adopt 4 distinct and very important parts of how we review projects in the city. One is the Public Works Standards, which generally speaking covers work in the right-of-way and other road design standards. And that was adopted in December of 2016. The second plan that was adopted was the Storm and Surface Water Management Comprehensive Plan. And then the city also looked at updating the King County Surface Water Design Manual, which had what we call the Sammamish Addendum. It's a King County document that specifies how we deal with runoff, and then we have a Sammamish specific part of that. And then at the end of 2016, we also updated our LID code to kind of address the stormwater updates that were done with numbers 2 and 3 above. So with that being said, when we went in front of the commission on July 6th, we again discussed the first round of proposals, or the first round of the proposal, and it generated a lot of good discussion. And there were 3 distinct revisions that were requested. There was a lot of good discussion. There were a lot of good questions. So it's not just the 3 items that are up on the slide. However, those 3 items related to specific changes that happened in the document. One of those was to essentially verify our inventory of capital facilities, specifically as it related to surface water facilities, stormwater facilities. And 2 was to add subtotals to the stormwater capital improvement projects list. And that was, as I recall, a request by commission to make it a little bit easier to understand and get a better picture of the whole effort for stormwater, and essentially categorize those types of projects in the city. And then 3, there was a request to provide a more specific link to the city's website to improve the user friendliness of the document. So just to specifically address those items, we did look at the inventory. We checked with our GIS staff. We verified the numbers, and those numbers are reflected in the packet in front of you. One thing to note is that the figures are approximate, and they do grow over time. So it's kind of a snapshot in time, not necessarily the entire picture of everything every time you look at the document. And then 2, we did add subtotals as shown in your packet, as well as just briefly excerpted on the slide. We thought that was a good addition. It made it a little bit easier to understand the table. And then one thing was that I do want to address a little bit more specifically is the website. So we want to say we do understand that there is some frustration using the city's website. It's not as clean and easy to use as maybe we hope it to be. But the link that was provided in the first round of revisions was just a general link to the city's homepage, and we have refined that to link you to the Public Works Department homepage. And that the reason why that was done is because, yes, the Public Works homepage does have more items than just stormwater. However, it's the best place to obtain the stormwater documents. The city is working to update parts of this webpage, so it will improve over time, which is why we want to keep the link to the Public Works Department page, because that will not change. Some of the subsequent links may change. So we don't want to have a dead link in the document. We would like to have it work for everybody using it. So we feel like this is the best approach to that. So without belaboring any of these points too much, the next steps that we have in the process are to hold the public hearing, as Chair Collins mentioned earlier. Open the public hearing, take public testimony, close the public hearing, and then begin deliberations and hopefully provide a recommendation to City Council. And then, as noted on your slide, beginning in September, we will take it to City Council for the first reading and public hearing, and then second reading on September 19th. And then we will have a consolidated ordinance that adopts all of the amendments to the comprehensive plan once during 2017, and that'll happen in November, late November. And sorry, one quick note. We did get some questions from the public in the meantime, and one slide we did want to address before we open the public hearing is in regard to the capital improvement projects list for the transportation projects, and that was specifically in relation to project TR03, and that's the project description for that is the Issaquah Pine Lake Road Southeast project, and it's specifically related to the segment of the road between Southeast 48th Street and Klahani Boulevard, so north of 48th to Klahani. And we wanted to make sure that we drew the distinction between the other project on Issaquah Pine Lake, which is a project in the city of Issaquah's transportation improvement projects list, and that is Issaquah's TR 17, which takes the road improvement project from Southeast 48th Street down to Issaquah Falls City Road. And that, I should note, is listed as quote unquote a future project. So it's not intended to occur in the 6-year timeframe of the TIP. They've identified it for a future date, but they have provided a cost estimate to it. So it is on their tip, but the portion that is within the city's tip is north of 48th to Kalahani Boulevard. So we just wanted to clarify that. That came up from a member of the public, so we thought we'd try to get ahead of that. And then, all right, with that, I think we are done with the presentation, and we'll turn it over to Chair Collins.
Thank you for the presentation. Okay, do any commissioners have questions or comments related to any of the elements that we're talking about tonight?
I'm sorry, Larry.
No, go right.
I just had a quick question, Doug, just like a quick definition. When we're looking at stormwater and surface water, can you define for me and for those others who are not au fait with all of this, like the difference? And then when you say surface water facilities, what exactly is that?
Good evening, Cheryl Paston with the Public Works Department. It's a great question. Even in the sort of the stormwater industry, there can be a little bit of debate. But basically, we make a distinction between stormwater, which is really rain, just rain falling from the sky, runoff, and surface water is really meant to include lakes, streams, wetlands, ponds, those kinds of water bodies. So they both of them require different management practices. They impact properties and the roads. They just have a different. They just require a different type of approach to management and enhancement and maintaining them. And I think your other question was surface water facilities. Those and again, that kind of depends on the agency. They use those terms differently. What we define them as our stormwater ponds or stormwater tanks. That's generally, and actually sort of the conveyance system that is connected directly to them. That is what we call a stormwater facility. So I hope that helps.
And then it mentions in here like surface water facilities, and I was just kind of curious, what is that? Because you said it's ponds, streams, lakes. So and when you talk about surface water facilities, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, if it does say surface water, it probably should have been stormwater facilities, but they do mean the ponds, the okay. Retention and detention constructed ponds to deal with stormwater, to prevent stormwater flooding.
Okay.
Or stormwater treatment.
All right, thank you.
As a quick follow-up to that then, should we change the surface water design manual to the stormwater design manual?
That is the name that the county has used, and so we've just adopted it. That's not really something that we can change, but we can certainly make that suggestion to the county the next time that they update their manual.
I just wanted to follow up on Mr. McIntyre's statement, and maybe to indicate that I had read some of the packet, is your Issaquah Falls City Road TR 17, is that the one that has the 3 little periods that says it's outside the city of Sammamish? Good. Thank you for that.
I have a concern. I picked up the packet on Friday and printed it over the weekend, and it's not the same as the one we got tonight. So I'm seeing that this one has subtotals, the old one didn't. Are there other changes? Because I don't want to go through the whole thing over again.
Correct. That is an email that we sent on Monday to the Planning Commission explaining the changes that occurred and reissuing a corrected packet. So that was unfortunately a formatting mistake. We had done the changes in track changes, and we thought we had captured everything, and then when we accepted it, there was something that happened in the document that I, for technical reasons, can't explain, but we did not capture, as you mentioned, the subtotals in there, as well as it was the table, the transportation improvement projects list was not correctly reflected. So the edits that were made and resent on Monday corrected those. So we apologize for that. Hopefully everybody got it. We tried to do our best to quickly rectify the issue. So I apologize, Commissioner Garrison, if you did not receive that.
I might be saying the wrong things tonight, so you can tell me to
Okay.
where to go or what to look at.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I'm wondering about the transportation section that's repeated in this discussion tonight, as was in the transportation section we talked about before. And I can't reconcile what the source documents are in this. There are some differences in the total numbers, and you also expanded the time frame. So when I compare it to the tip from last year, from last June, not this year's, there are some totals of projects that don't coincide.
So without getting into the difference between the TIP and the 2016 version of it and now, what we did was we tried to reflect in the capital facilities element, which is where all the capital improvement projects are listed for parks, storm, et cetera, all the public services. So the list that we have in your proposed, in the proposed packet in front of you is to reflect the recently adopted TIP. And the timeframe was expanded to reflect use of traffic impact fees. So it did go to a 20-year list. It was listed as a 20-year list in the existing comprehensive plan. However, that needed to be updated, and it didn't capture all of the projects. So that's what the list is in front of you tonight.
Did that change the dollar amounts, though, extending that time frame? I was going line by line on the TIP from 2016, and there are a couple of them that the numbers are off. And I'm not sure if my role in this, if our role as commissioners, is to double-check line by line. But I found even the list of the projects, the order of the projects, doesn't correspond with the TIP. It seems like it would be a lot easier if that whole document that was approved by council is duplicated here.
Some of the differences are so our project managers are updating the cost of the projects on a pretty regular basis. I believe that the comprehensive plan showed I want to say the 2016 to 2021 tip, or
no, there's 15.
Oh, okay. So it was. I was trying to remember. Was it 15 or 16? That's right. It would have been 15 to 20.
The 16.
So between when the comprehensive plan was adopted and when the 2017 to 2022 tip was approved by council, the costs were updated by the project managers. So that's why it won't be you'll see the same projects listed, but the costs might be different because of that time difference. And they're not necessarily in the same order. I think they're not listed in order of priority.
As the TIP is.
The TIP isn't really listed in order of
I'm just looking for
priority either.
consistency. I mean, it's hard, if that's the goal of these amendments,
Right.
is to improve in clarity and consistency. I'm not seeing it.
We did change the numbering system also, and that so we in the 17 to 2022 tip, we started using TR dash and then the number to identify the projects, and so I put them in order of that new numbering system. So that's partly why the order is different than it was in the original.
I thought it was TRs in 2016 as well. But
I'm talking the 2015, so from 2015.
2015 is the existing. We're working on the 2016. 2017 was just approved by council, but we're not addressing that.
The
But I guess
list,
that goes to the next thing, and that is, why can't this reflect 2017 numbers as was just approved by council?
so the list that the council just adopted, that, I'm sorry, the list that's in your packet is the 2017 to 2022 capital projects list.
That's not what I understood, but
So Nancy, you're seeing that
This,
there's different projects?
it was my understanding from the docket request that we were applying the 2017 to 2022 six-year transportation improvement plan, which was adopted by City Council on June 21st, 2016. The thing is, the City Council on June 27th, 2017, just adopted the 2018 to 2023 six-year transportation plan. And if we're going to keep this updated, and this is part of the discussion later on too, is I'm not following why and how useful it is to update a document that now has become outdated immediately.
So the problem is that council just approved the 2018 to 23
Before we started talking about this,
before we started talking about this. Okay.
because last meeting we started
We
talking about
started,
it.
yeah.
What two different things?
I think the tip is different from the capital facilities plan.
Just for clarification, when we refer to the traffic, the TIP acronyms versus what we're looking at tonight, they're two different things, aren't they?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, it's what the council adopted last week was different than what we're looking at now. They adopted the transportation plan. We're looking for changes to the comprehensive plan.
Well, I think we're looking for changes in the capital facilities element.
Well,
And I don't know if all the tip projects are in the capital facilities element, and that may be the problem. So let's give staff a minute.
So when we were putting the packet together, we were considering putting the 2018 to 2023 tip, and our direction was to put the 2017 to the 2022 list of transportation projects. Next year, yes, you're right, it will lag behind. So next year it'll be the 18 to the 2023, or actually, sorry, 18 to 2030, whatever the 20-year snapshot will be for the transportation list of projects. So I do apologize that is a source of confusion. But our most current list of transportation projects, yes, the council has just adopted them.
Okay, so when we looked at the transportation element last time, and I'm sorry, this goes back to the consistency. I'm looking at the background table T10 from our last session, and again, it doesn't match what the consultants and all of us went through compared to this one. So I'm looking, for instance, at TR2, Issaquah Pine Lake to Klahani. This packet says $16,306,000. The transportation element that we did says 12,677,000.
Well, is this the same issue where it doesn't, it's not 2018
I just don't
to
think this is ready to
2023?
go. So, I mean, I'm just pointing out there are some inconsistencies here that I'm not sure this is ready to move to a public hearing.
So with regard to the transportation element, those amendments were done earlier, a little bit earlier, and that one is still going through revisions with City Council, so that even though it went through the Planning Commission, it's still being refined at the City Council level. That has actually been postponed as well to September with City Council. So there are updates being made to that, and I believe also, I don't have the document in front of me, but the table T10, I think, was being updated as part of that. And again, I can't recall, so I apologize if I misstate anything in relation to that.
No,
topic.
that is true, that they said the consultant had even said in the July 11th council meeting that some of the numbers were wrong. So I think that we almost have to wait till all of this is straightened out and the numbers are consistent in order to proceed. Because there's no sense in sending this packet that's going to be revised. We don't know what it's going to be revised to. We're just not ready yet. So I think that we should wait until the City Council has ironed out the transportation element issues before we can move forward on this. In fact, it was brought up again on Tuesday's meeting that, you know, there were errors in that. And I hate a package to come from the Planning Commission that has inaccurate information in it. We should wait for them to settle that.
How do the rest of the commissioners feel about this? Do you feel that it's ready, or would you like to?
Can we strike out part and approve part and send half of it back for waiting?
I don't think that we should do that. I think if we're going to wait, we should wait on the whole package. One thing to remember is that this is a working document. It will be changed by City Council. I don't know that it has to be perfect before it doesn't have to be perfect before it gets to City Council, because they will be making changes. So let's hear from Kelly Hildy.
Thank you. Kelly Hildy, Planning Manager here at the City of Sammamish. I wanted to also offer a suggestion. I think you bring up some really good points, Commissioner Anderson. One of the recommendations is that you can make the recommendation to Council that these items are corrected, so we can actually, those questions that you had, the recommendation is that they are updated prior to their public hearing as part of the council process. Excuse me. So anyway, that's a recommendation.
So we could make a recommendation that the projects from the 2018 to 2023, or I guess that would be, yeah, 2023 tip, that would be part of the City Council's packet.
Yes, that could be a part of the Planning Commission's recommendation to Council to include the updated tip, to refine the numbers in this docket item per the corrections in the transportation element. Mm-hmm. So pointing out that there are some inconsistencies, there's some concerns, and that Council sees that as part of your recommendation.
Mm-hmm. That would be my preference, just because we're going on to the August recess, and I think it would be nice to give staff the month to work on this before they bring it to Council in September.
That's what I was thinking, that the next meeting, I believe, of the City Council is on September 4th, and there should be time to make the numerical corrections. And again, I still feel that we want to move forward the recommendation for the comprehensive plan amendments, and if we want to make what we just heard, that's fine, but I think we need to get this moving for the City Council can be ready to look at it early in September.
I worry that we're making little detailed text corrections to a document that isn't even going to be valued or used. We need to make those little corrections to the final amendment, I would think. This should come after, our detailed work should come after the general plans are decided. I agree with Nancy.
I guess I'd have to add, too, that there are elements of the capital facilities element that weren't highlighted here that are outdated as well. So something like the inventory of existing facilities, the number of miles of roads, the number of stoplights and all that. I remember one of the consultants, when I asked him, why do we have to give all this detail? Why can't you just say, we're a city of stoplights and stop signs, a number of miles of roads and all that, because they constantly are outdated potentially. And he said it's required under the GMA. So I'd imagine it's required under the GMA for this page that wasn't updated by staff to be updated now. So again, I just find it's an incomplete picture of the capital facilities element.
So thank you for that question, because I think it does help to again clarify that when we do the comprehensive plan, yes, it is required by the GMA to have an inventory of certain utilities and facilities. There is no requirement that be a perfect snapshot in time. It's a lot of these are approximations, and their best guess is based on GIS data and other data that we do have. It is very common. Essentially, every comprehensive plan in the state is the same way, in the sense that we don't update the inventories frequently at all. We usually take the eight-year update to actually do that, and the reason why is resources. One is the biggest. The reason why we did try to take a look at it now is because we are specifically updating the stormwater management, the other parts of the comprehensive plan that relate to stormwater management. Therefore, we wanted to give you a complete picture of that update. So you're correct that parts of that, the capital facilities element, are potentially outdated. However, that is a very common occurrence throughout the state. It's how comprehensive plans, the nature of a comprehensive plan.
I understand that, but the transportation element of that section was updated with the consultants. So all you had to do was lift those numbers. It wasn't a new inventory. And it's on page T16 of what we passed on to council. I'm not picking on you in the sense that not all these changes have been made. I think it's just not a document quite ready for us to pass to council. I don't feel comfortable having open-ended, wait till council. I'd like to see the packet that gets recommended before it moves forward.
The other thing that we tend to be caught with is very specific scope of work requirements. So when an item is docketed, we take the request that is explicitly spelled out in the application, and that is our scope of work. So we try really hard to stay within the boundaries. So as they do, this is the difficulty that we find with comprehensive plans and other policy documents, is that everything has tentacles into all sorts of different documents. And so we try our best to stay within the narrow focus of the work that we're supposed to do, partly because of resources, but also partly because when it is approved by council to be on the docket, those are the marching orders. So we try to stay within the swim lane, so to speak.
I understand that.
So.
And I went back to the original docket request, and it didn't include for this section the transportation element. So I was surprised to even see pieces of this being updated in the capital facilities, because it wasn't going to be addressed. It was stormwater.
Yeah.
It was very limited in scope, and I think this is why I wanted to bring up further discussion later, is that there have been elements that are outside of what the docket requests were, and then there are other areas that we're told that we can't update at this time. So a little more exploration into consistency there would be helpful. Thank you.
I think we should at least hear from the folks that came tonight, and so I think we should open the public hearing.
And if the commission chooses to, if it is going to be postponed and not recommended tonight, then I think we should potentially not close.
Leave it open.
Correct.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, so
I have some more corrections, and I wonder if I should state them now. They're detailed oriented that might help when you do give us the final one, if this goes through that way.
okay.
On UT 10 and CF 10, I don't know why you don't, those 3 vaults that the city owns near town center, I would think those should be added to that list of existing facilities. We may be going into a more urban type of landscape in Sammamish, and I think that would be an important thing to have in the comprehensive plan, and I think it would make it more accurate.
Commissioner Garrison, can you back up on that? And tell me what you're thinking. A little bit more detail. On UT 10 and stormwater?
On UT 10 and CF 10, they have a listing of the inventory of existing facilities, but those 3 vaults owned by the city are not in here.
3 vaults. You mean the...
Underground vaults.
Okay, so you're saying, so we have the pipe, the catch basins, the swales, the
Right.
surface water facilities.
But not those vaults.
They could be in the publicly owned and maintained surface water facilities. I would think they would be within that. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, so if the city owns the 3 ones that you're speaking about, they would be in that 425 publicly owned and maintained surface water facilities. Does that make sense?
I will accept that, but I sure think it's an opportunity missed to have in the comp plan. I like people to see options and other ways of doing things, and I like the comp plan to be more than platitudes and numbers. I would like it to be inspirational.
I think the only thing is if we break out those 3 vaults, we would have to break out so many different types of facilities that the city maintains. We'd have a list, I'm guessing it would be a list 20 or more long. So that's why we group it into the publicly owned and maintained surface water facilities. So I agree that it's nice to show what the options are, but I think in this case we have to kind of narrow it down.
Okay, so much for that. Let's go to CF12. When you have an inventory of existing facilities that's bulleted for the stormwater, I don't know why you don't bullet the ones for the traffic as well. The bullets are nice, they make it clearer. You've just got commas and an ongoing sentence there. I think it's consistent to have the bullets.
That makes sense.
Then on CF13, and I think probably from there on, the we have 2 columns there. One is that does this area need to meet the level of service, and the other one is does it have a concurrency failure? And when it says no, we don't need it to meet the level of service, no, there is no concurrency failure, then why are we spending $3 million on it? What reason is it? Is it a safety reason? There should be a reason that why we are doing it, and it seems to me we need another column to say why we're doing it. This happens over and over down this document, and I think that would make it much clearer. I just kept thinking, well, there's no problem here, no problem here, why are we doing this?
Some of the reasons why the projects would be on this list, like you said, even though those 2 columns it says no, is for, you're right, a lot of them are for safety reasons. Some of them are, for example, we want to build more sidewalks because they're in the close proximity of schools, and we want to encourage kids to be able to walk and to be able to walk to school safely. So there are other reasons why the council has decided to put these projects on their capital list.
And we have to remember that this document was approved by the city council, and we can't make changes to this part of the document, as I understand it. We wouldn't be able to add a column without the city council readopting the document. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
I would think that would be difficult. So while it's a good idea, it's something that we should do next time, I think.
And as the council adopts the 6-year CIP, the Public Works makes presentations, and they do explain for all new projects that appear on the list why it's on the list. Oftentimes the council directs the department to add projects or even expand the scope or move them up in time or move them back in time. So all of these projects are in response to requests either from the council, the community. Maybe it's a legal reason why we need to do it, for example, or it's a concurrency project. So there are many reasons why projects appear on the list and where in order.
And so if a citizen had a question about why it's on there, they could call the Public Works Department and get some information?
Yes, they can.
I think the description of the project even would kind of lead you maybe to some explanation as to why we're doing something when it says something like construct traffic signal, turn lanes, curb, gutter and sidewalk. You could kind of imagine, okay, I see why we're doing that. And at the beginning, where it talks about under forecast of future needs, and there's an explanation there that, you know, our city is growing and that we need to update and modernize some of our smaller roads and put sidewalks in there. I suppose that's by way of an explanation as to what all of these projects are about. It's a broad explanation, but I think that's maybe what they're trying to get at.
That's a good point, Commissioner O'Farrell. Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner
I
Garrison.
guess I would like to add to that, on CF12, that last paragraph also follows what we just heard. The city has many locations that were not constructed to urban standards. And here is a list of them. And here's what staff and council is estimated and considers reasonable for cost of improvement.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Crandall.
Just going for clarity and openness, which I think a column would add. When you go down it and see NA, 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 no, 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 it kind of becomes repetitive, and it seems like, well, then why?
That makes sense. It's a really good point. I think something we can consider for the future. Okay. With that, if there aren't any other comments from the commission, I'd like to open the public hearing. Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing now. And the first person I have on my list is Jim Stanton.
Jim Stanton, 22533 Southeast 47th Place. I live in the Highland Park neighborhood, which is on the very southern end of Sammamish. And I have some comments specific to the capital facilities plan starting on pages CF12 and running through CF18. And I guess I have some global comments about the process and the number of documents that you're being asked to review outside of just the capital facilities plan. And I will tell you, it's not because I've spent this week, I've spent the last 30 years practicing planning, both in city of Redmond and now at Microsoft for half of that time. And so I'm unfortunately very steeped in lots of this minutia. So But I wanted to talk about the process because I think what you and the council really need to be focused on is what is an outcome that's transparent to the public and that drives their ability to understand decision-making in the city. And so you have both the comprehensive plan, you have the transportation element that the council just reviewed a month or so ago and is going to come back to in November. And then you have transportation master plan work with Fair and Piers just kicking off, which is supposedly going to look globally at transportation in the city and what citizens want. That leads to functional plans, which is like what you have tonight, the capital facilities plan and the TIP. The Transportation Improvement Plan. The TIP is required by the state to be submitted. All cities have to submit that for state requirements under GMA by July 1st every year, and that's why we do that. And then that leads to regulations, which would be impact fees, concurrency, and actual projects, right? So that's kind of the logical flow through. Large plans get to actual outcomes. And so my neighborhood, which has been testifying at hearings regarding the TIP for the last umpteen years. I think I have plans here that go back to, I have the TIP to 2013, but I know I've been at a hearing since 2007. So I have specific comments around Issaquah Pine Lake Road in particular, and let me just kind of run through those in detail. So in 2013, there's 2 segments on the TIP that were project for improvements to Issaquah Pine Lake Road down to the boundary line with Issaquah, which is the street that accesses my neighborhood, which is Southeast 48th Street. And the total improvements on the TIP were $17 million. And then the TIP went to 39 in 2014. Project, which was going to start improvements on that street in 2017, went from $1 million to $800,000. That stayed consistent on the 15 TIP and the 16 TIP. That total TIP got as large as $90 million in 2016. And then 2017 TIP went back to $73 million, and all the funding went away from the project specific to Issaquah Pine Lake Road. So again, the concern of our neighborhood is where is the consistency relative to what we have been expecting that, as is required by GMA, that projects be delivered within a 6-year window, that those projects work up the list in a logical fashion. They have funding associated with them, both city funding, mitigation from developers, and grant money from the state, and that there's some logical delivery of those projects. I can't speak to why this project is now no longer funded, but I do know on the Issaquah side of the line, just because I track all this stuff, I have the last 2 years of the TIP for Issaquah, and they were going to improve that portion of Issaquah Pine Lake Road that went from the boundary with Sammamish down to Issaquah Falls City Road. That was an $11 million project, which was funded in their 2016 TIP, and then is defunded in this year's TIP. So again, and then on the information you have tonight, we see that portion somehow arrives on this list, but is not funded, just TBD. So again, it's confusing to me, and I'm in the business. It's certainly confusing and frustrating to neighbors who access those streets for which they have not changed I've lived there since '94. I haven't seen a material change to that street in the entire time I've lived there. So that's somewhat of our frustration. And I think what would help improve that, I understand the funding priorities change, so I understand that. But what would be helpful is to take the charts that, whether it's the TIP document that then becomes, I assume, the CFP, and just drop them into the document, drop them into the plans, right? Have some policy statements that talk about what are intended outcomes and what are the criteria for which projects are decided upon, and then drop the chart into an appendices or somewhere in the document so that is fluid and that can change every year. So that, I guess, from a global standpoint, that would be my request, is just to make the process more transparent so that it has does a good job of articulating outcomes, not just the process that we go to, which is fairly arcane and most people, A, don't understand, and B, can't make sense of. And then lastly, I've been coming to public hearings till I'm blue in the face to talk about Issaquah Pine Lake Road. And that project has changed priorities. It's been split up into multiple phases. We've talked about that to the point where I'm the only person in my neighborhood that will even come anymore. So I don't know where to prioritize that, But I would just ask that whatever forum that is the right forum, whether here at City Council or at some other point, that there be some identification of those that have paid into those funds, whether it's mitigation by projects along that road and or taxpayers have been paying for a significant period of time, and some recognition that those projects are critical and they don't, and that the continuity of that list is critical, right? That we can't just pull projects off and put projects on, both for the potential for legal challenge, but also just for the sake of continuity. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Stanton. I think you heard some of the same feelings from the council tonight, and I drive that road and I know what you're talking about. In Issaquah Falls City, or excuse me, Issaquah Pine Lake Road is affected by a lot of different changes, even down to where they've closed the access under the freeway to the post office. It seems to be affecting everything we're doing. I did have one question, though. It seemed like there had been some improvement on 48th with the street light when they put in Symphony Ridge. Again, you're more active in that, but it looks like there had been some improvement along that road.
Well, you are correct. There's the signal that's currently at 48th Street was installed by virtue of mitigation from the developers on the Issaquah side of the line. There's 4 plats there, and they were required to do that. Coincidentally, that signal was on the TIP prior to that development. It was a $350,000 project that was like 2010 or 11. It was on the city's TIP. It was then determined between the two cities that for SEPA purposes to address mitigation that they would make the developers do that. So that money was repurposed to other projects. And so that's part of my point is, you know, projects come along and there's, again, continuity for funding. We rely on the fact that in 2017, 18, 20, those projects are going to work their way through, that Issaquah Falls City Road that somehow becomes part of a deal for annexation doesn't somehow come onto the list because two cities negotiated a deal, and that therefore it changes the prioritization of other projects. Same issue with that, right? Okay. So if we think we're going to actually have people use transit and walk and bike, we have to build some sort of way to identify that those projects come in a logical sequence so they can see those as opposed to kind of jumping around.
Well, thank you, and that's, I just wanted to say that we appreciate your comments tonight.
You bet. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak tonight? Yes. Mr. Stickney.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Paul Stickney at 504 228th Ave Southeast. And if I'm a little rummy, it's because I still haven't gotten over staying up until 12:45 for the council meeting on Tuesday night. However, the council stayed until 1:45, so they had quite the ordeal. These comments are going to be a little bit holistic, kind of everything kind of taken as a whole, and they're a little extemporaneous as well, so not quite typed and written in a certain order. In my industry, in real estate, I've been in it since 1977. I want to give 2 quick analogies, one tied to what Mr. McIntyre chatted about. We have in our business the adage normal wear and tear accepted. So if this comp plan update is meant to be just sort of it's meant to update significant change, not so much normal wear and tear, normal change in the city that comes at a, you know, predictable average rate. It's covering more big stuff like surface water and stormwater. However, what I caught is a little more high level and overview at the holistic level. In the capital facilities plan, it also covers schools, and a fairly large change is Eastern Washington and the Mars Hill School. It also covers parks and parks CIP. Well, Parks is undergoing a really big change right now, and there's a lot of new projects on the Parks draft list that are coming up. And I'm not saying for sure these need to be addressed in the current comp plan update. I've got sort of a four-way matrix. They could be addressed in this comp plan update, or one in a year or two, or neither, or both. So I don't know the answer. It just could be in those regards. Something else that is quite significant change since the comp plan got adopted, and it is a capital facility, it is land acquisition, and that's not here. And there's a lot of projects upcoming on land acquisition and going forward at full tilt, and that makes sense. And I did, honestly, I took a nice long nap on Tuesday, so I actually stayed up and was actually quite excited. It was kind of fun. It was a long meeting. And I don't keep this kind of information on everything I do. So if you come and ask me something else, I can't give it to you as this. But on pages 201 to 218 of last Tuesday night's City Council packet, there's a pretty awesome stormwater rate update. But what's important about that is the last 6 or 7 pages of that packet have all the 2018 to 2023 stormwater updates, which are in your packet, with many, many changes, not the same as what you have. So the question is, should schools be added? Should parks be added? Should capital facilities, or excuse me, should parks plans be added? Should land acquisition be added? And if so, in partial now, partial next year, not at all, or both? And that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Stickney. Would anyone else like to speak tonight? That's okay. When you get to the podium, just say your name and state your address.
I'm Denise Steele Darnell, and I live at 2121 200th Avenue Southeast in Sammamish. I live in Sammamish Woods, which is the older part on the other side. And I was hoping to come actually for the general comments, but I got stuck on the freeway bringing someone to the airport. So to connect, because I know this comment is really supposed to be just about this agenda right now, the public comment. Okay.
Yeah,
so I'm part of a group called Save Sammamish. I don't know if you're aware of it, but we're now pretty large, over 1,000 people. It's a Facebook page, but we all also have regular meetings in person, and we're just a big group of citizens that feel really strongly about protecting the trees and the environment. And one thing that makes me a little worried reading this list is how many projects are being planned where obviously trees are going to have to be cut down and there's going to be a lot of destruction. And I noticed that today on 212th and 24th, which is near where I live, one of the projects in here has gotten started, which is the Gap. I guess they're going to add a sidewalk sort of near the Creekside School neighborhood and past the fire station right there by Pine Lake Community Center. And as I'm driving through, there's must be 10 trees that were just cut down to make this new sidewalk, I guess they're planning. So one of the things I wanted to mention that relates to this is just making sure that the council and the planning commission is careful about the environment and the trees and what we're doing as we're doing all these improvements. And I almost wonder if they're all necessary. It seems like such a huge list because I think our city is getting so urban, and many of us feel really sad about that. We don't want to live in such an urbanized city. We want to keep the forests and the trees. That's why we all moved here. So I'm really concerned that some of these projects maybe aren't quite necessary where we need to be cutting so many of the trees. My second comment is about the signage. So there's been a sign on that 212th and 24th stating that there was going to be some capital improvement done. It's really confusing, though, to just a lay person what was actually going to happen. So I've driven by and tried to read the sign as I'm going, and I never understood that a sidewalk was going to be built there. So today I actually asked the people with the stop signs, the stopping traffic, what are they what are they doing? And she was able to tell me. So one of the requests I would love to have is for citizens like me to have different kind of signs that you can easily see. New sidewalk planned. I cannot even understand what the sign is saying. And so I would love that, especially because unless you pull over and almost cause an accident, you can't read the signs. And I'm a person often goes to city council as well. I've told them the same thing with the blue signs and the white paper. You can't understand what is going on. And it would be really helpful. I don't feel like the website is that clear either, where we can easily find, like, I can't click on 212th and 24th and see what is going to happen right there down from my street. So that would be a really lovely thing I think a lot of people would agree upon too. So anyway, that's two things I wanted to mention today. I also am just really quickly, I care about land acquisition. I love what you were saying with the land acquisition nominations for land, and we're currently working on trying to not have the Parker Plat be built, which has to do with a pilot project that the City Council talked about on Tuesday. So again, the general theme of just protecting the trees and being really careful with our urbanization of the area. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comment. And I almost forgot to say that an email came in this evening, and it was from James Eastman, and he has some concerns about a road between his development, Hidden Ridge, and East Lake Sammamish Parkway. So we have the email, and it will be on record. I just wanted to make sure that that was on record, that he submitted that email as his public comment. So we have that.
I wanted to just try to, I know we have some things to do, and we're not quite there getting them done, but Denise, I didn't catch your last name, so is it all right to refer to you as Denise? Yes. Thank you. It really, and I'll tell you why, but sitting here tonight and hearing the public input really makes me feel good, because I try not to speak in the personal pronouns, but sometimes you have to. I have had the opportunity to attend the candidate forum for this council here in Sammamish, but also last night at Bakley Hall in the Issaquah Highlands, the 3 individuals running for the mayor of Issaquah. Very edifying. Traffic came also up at, I'll talk just about the Issaquah one and be quick. Traffic was very important, and the other thing that became very clear was regional connectivity between the governing bodies. Okay, then let's see, it was yesterday morning at I went to the Mercer Slough for kind of an answer to some of your questions, Denise, on the urban forest management plan. And we will be addressing the Planning Commission, and the Parks and Rec will do it start about 5 p.m. on September 6th. Is that okay? It's in the future to talk about that, but there's one thing that was talked about, or 2 things that were talked about in the urban forest, and that was 2 million people will be moving into our state by 2040. And the gentleman is making the presentation, and I think this affects all the things we're looking at, both planning and taking care of and undoing. They're not going to build 10 new cities. These 2 million people are going to go mostly into the urban areas. It would be nice if we had some rule that say you have to enlarge the George at the Gorge to, have 80,000 people in it, but that's not going to happen. Maybe. The other thing that came up was, and just made me smile when I heard it, and hopefully it will answer some of the questions of our last 3 public people, and that is, there is a movement to consider trees as part of the infrastructure, and not just in emerald necklaces, but actually when you get this tree canopy counted and we get our urban forest management plan, that type of thing will become part of the infrastructure along with sewer lines and roadways and sidewalks. So there's some good and more good out there. So thank you. Sorry it takes so long, but I was impressed.
I just wanted to mention when we talk about sidewalks and trees coming down to accommodate sidewalks, which, you know, I agree with you. But I do think it's part of this other thing that we've been talking about, walkability and people being able to get around our city without using their cars, and children being able to walk back and forth to school without having to walk on the hard shoulder, and then parents having to drive up to the school to pick them up, which all contributes to the traffic in our city. So I hear you about the trees coming down. It actually breaks my heart when I see a tree coming down too, I have to say. But I do think that there is a bigger picture. If we want people to really seriously consider leaving the cars at home for those short trips that we make around the city, and then as a result attempt to reduce the traffic load around our city, that we really do need to have neighbourhoods connected where you can walk from here to here, and there's a signal and there's a crosswalk, and it's a safe sidewalk for younger people to walk on. That will encourage people to leave their cars at home, I hope, and as a result maybe reduce our congestion. In the hope as well that we're up maybe replacing trees, you know, down the line.
Yeah, if I can just make a quick comment about that. On 24th...
You know what? I'm sorry, we can't go back and forth.
Okay, no, that's
Sorry.
fine then. Okay, thank you.
I have a comment too on that. A lot of the times it seems we're not creative with our sidewalks, and they could meander around trees. We could leave trees. We could go away from if we had enough right-of-way, we could go away from the curbside. But it seems like engineering likes to really stick by the guns of true engineering and build it all together in one structure. So I think that needs to be looked at, and engineering, public works needs to be more creative.
Good point.
Okay, so I'd like a show of hands. And we're not going to do a formal vote, but I'm wondering if I need to keep this public hearing open. So I'd like to see a show of hands who would like to close the public hearing and move forward with sending this to council tonight. Show of hands.
Public hearing, I don't want to vote to send it to council.
Okay, so if I close the public hearing, then we will prepare this document to go forward. If I leave the public hearing open, then we can have another meeting to discuss the transportation improvement project list, much like what Nancy's proposing. So if I leave it open, then we can discuss, then we can talk about this again next time. If I close it, then we really need to finish up tonight and move the item forward. Is that right, Mr. McIntyre?
That's, I think, mostly right. I just want to add that if you close it, you can still have continued deliberations. That closing the public hearing just closes the testimony. You can continue discussions. So I think, I believe that's the other layer to that.
I just worry about closing it and not having more public testimony. If we go to another meeting and we have new material and new items, I would want the public to be able to comment on those new items and new material. So I think I should leave it open.
I was thinking that we could close it, and any time that we go to the second hearing, that would entail that the necessity of having public hearings. Because we're really looking at the material again in a new fashion, which would mean there would be that 7 minutes after, somewhere on the program.
What we're doing is we're asking, or what I'm asking is to continue the public hearing.
That's what you want, right?
To the next meeting, not to close the public hearing. The public comment for the public hearing tonight needs to close. I mean, we don't want to be here all night. So that's okay to close, but it's that we are continuing the public hearing.
Okay.
And we're not asking for a formal vote now, potentially to go to council. And the only reason I mention that is because this is a very significant issue in our city right now. I'm not just talking about the wordsmithing numbers and such. This is a very broad discussion at the council level happening as we speak. And I think until some of these things are really examined a little more by our city council, I mean, it's too bad it's part of the capital facilities element, but it is part of what the package was presented to us, and I don't think it's quite ready yet. And I'd like to hear back from the city council as well.
I guess my concern with that.
And we have time.
Well, to interrupt.
We do it.
Would be, what are we going to charge staff to do in the meantime? Well, if we're going to hold it again, what are we going to be looking at? This page only, or do you want changes to what we have?
Well, I think we talked about changes tonight, not just in the numbers.
A few changes. I think the bullets.
I assume you guys have been tracking. Then it's not just what I've talked about. It's a number of people have offered information. So yeah, the staff would have some updates to the packet.
But you're actually talking about waiting for city council.
Which should be coming up, and yeah, I mean, there's some things within the transportation element that were really debated.
Can I?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. So before I say anything, I do want to say I appreciate all the comments, and I hear the concerns. But with that being said, I do want to offer a different opinion to consider. So we have both Planning Commission and City Council do have a break in August. This is the last meeting until September 5th. September 5th for City Council and September 6th for Planning Commission. So we schedule our work program very deliberately and intentionally to have our work program essentially staggered for staff resources as well as accomplishing the goals that we do want to accomplish. So with that being said, I just want to acknowledge that there are potential risks in maybe not recommending anything tonight. And the reason why I say that is because it will impact our schedule, and so it has impacts on other work programs that we are looking at. So we wanted to come back with electronic reader board signs. We wanted to come back with housing strategy plan. We want to come back with some other growth strategy conversations, as well as a town center update. So there are impacts. It's kind of like squeezing a balloon. We only have so much time. You squeeze it here, it pops out here. So so that's just something to consider. The other point I want to make is between essentially the entire, I guess, 2017 dating back to a little bit into the end of 2016, I guess that's when I've been here. So that's why I'm recalling those timeframes. We have worked with the commission on two specific items where we did have marching orders from commission following the hearing and following a vote to amend and refine certain areas of a proposal. For instance, sign code, we had about 4 to 5 edits made based on deliberations of the Planning Commission that we then held the vote on, got a recommendation, made the amendments prior to going to City Council. So the other example was with our transportation element, actually, we made 3 to 4, I believe it was 3 actually, refinements based on Commissioner Garrison and other commissioners' specific concerns on specific items. And we didn't come back to Planning Commission on those. And I understand that those may be different types of concerns, so I do want to acknowledge that. But there has been a level of trust between staff and Planning Commission that we do hear your concerns. We actually do go back and view the videos between Kevin, myself, and Kelly. We actually all, and a lot of times David Goodman as well, we actually all go back and review, take notes again, and then make sure that we capture everything to then make the actual edits in the recommended version to take to City Council. So I do want to acknowledge that. With that being said, I do think that there are other risks related to not taking action today, and one of those would be potentially related to, and I'll let Cheryl pass an add-on to this, but essentially by not reflecting some of the changes to the capital facilities plan, we could put ourselves in a position where we don't have a compliant document. We would revert back then to the 2015 updated version of the comprehensive plan. So we don't at this point in time have anything specific that I can point to that says, oh, this is actually illegal. But it would put us in a position where we would have to do that assessment because we do have to make these edits in 2017. So amending or revising the work plan and schedule could have unintentional consequences related to how we maintain our consistency and compliance with the Growth Management Act. So again, I can't point to anything off the top of my head. I haven't had time to kind of consider everything that would be potentially at risk. But if we don't adopt any of the amendments in 2017, then we could have an issue with obtaining grant funds, for instance, for specific road projects, obtaining other types of potential funding for other types of, not just transportation, but other types of projects. We do seek a combination of state and federal funding for almost everything. So there are other risks that I just want to put on record, and with the caveat that I do understand your concerns. I'm not trying to minimize concerns. I just want to make sure we understand the whole package if we don't vote. So I would, with that being said, I'll let Cheryl add on it, like I said, but I would ask the chair to maybe potentially seek a motion just to see if there is a prevailing sentiment one way or the other.
That's what I was planning to do. So I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing if we want to go that way. If we want to continue the hearing, I'd like to have a motion to continue the hearing, and then we can vote to continue it.
I just have a quick question though for staff. So if we recommend this to the council, can the commission's concerns be addressed between now and then? And are they so significant that it is a new document? Because I guess I'm concerned about our function. If we're passing on a broken document, why are we bothering?
Mm-hmm. So the easy answer to that is that we actually are lucky that August is a break month because we do have additional time. So the next time it would come up is in September. So in that time we can engage Planning Commission in a, I guess, maybe over email or another way. Again, I haven't had time to think about how that would look, but that would demonstrate to Planning Commission that we have either made edits or addressed concerns or addressed specific items that have been brought up either tonight or following discussion tonight.
And what's the threshold for requiring some sort of a public forum for those changes? I mean, I understand that the email is part of the public record, but where do we reach the point when there has to be an opportunity for the public to comment?
Well, the public comment would be able to, the public would be able to make their comments at City Council meeting.
At City Council, correct. And
there will be 2 readings. Actually, I think there's 3.
Yeah, technically there will be 3, but there's 2, essentially, 1 independent hearing for the transportation element, 1 independent for the capital facilities, and then they combined with the consolidated element or ordinance. So you're correct, and actually I will say that planning commissions are not, to my knowledge, obligated by state law to even hold a public hearing. So the fact that we do it is just a way to further engage the public in these edits that we're making. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's a good way to engage the public, which leads then into deliberations and then results in a recommendation. Ultimately, it's the recommendation that matters. So as Chair Collins said, once, and this relates to everything in the process, is once Planning Commission finishes their review of it and recommends a document, then the public process continues through the City Council, and that is where the final action is taken. So that is the ultimate authority, if you will, on every legislative action.
And I want to make another comment, because the document, I don't think the document is broken, and we need to be really clear about what we're doing tonight. We have 4 documents that were approved by the City Council, and those documents are supposed to be shown in the new comp plan, the revised comp plan. Okay, those are the text amendments that we're supposed to be reviewing. We're not really supposed to change those documents that have already been approved by City Council. It's nice to make a few changes, and it's nice if we see something that's obvious and easy to fix. I think it's okay to make changes, but we are not in a position where we should be making any big changes at this point. So I don't want to make the illusion that this is a broken document in any way. I think all four of those, the lid, the manual with the amendment, and I guess the capital facilities and the tip, that is throwing things off a little bit. But I want to reiterate that all these documents have been approved by City Council, and we're just trying to drop them into the comp plan. So I am actually in favor of closing the public hearing and moving these documents onto City Council with the caveat that we put the new tip, which is the 2018 to 2023. So that would be my suggestion for the evening. But I don't want to move forward if the rest of the commission is not comfortable with that. So.
Well, I would, before we can discuss it, I would go ahead and make that motion that we close the public hearing on tonight's item, and we send the document with future amendments to the by staff to the City Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think that's 4. Any opposed, say nay.
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 Okay, so we will close the public hearing. The vote was 4-2. So the public hearing will be closed, and now we will go into deliberations. So we will need another motion to approve the document with the recommended amendments. And I think Mr. McIntyre had, you had a recommendation for us.
Correct.
Or a
Chair
recommended
Collins,
motion.
Suggest a motion which was developed prior to the meeting. So there are, this is certainly just a place to start.
I would entertain this motion.
I would second.
No,
Oh,
I'm just asking for
okay.
someone to make this motion. Just say, I move.
I move to recommend the City Council adopt the docketed 2017 Comprehensive Plan Amendment for the Environment and Conservation, Utility, and Capital Facility element as presented, with the direction to staff to make the amendments as provided by the Commission this evening.
Second.
And there's a second. So all those in favor of the recommended motion, say aye. Aye. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Nancy. Okay, so we had a second, so let's open it up for discussion. Sorry about that. I apologize.
I guess I just need some clarity. What are the amendments that we're talking about, and does this include the clarification of the transportation portion, or?
Okay, let's do this. We have this piece right here, just this motion. So this is going to be the main motion. So move to recommend that the City Council adopt the docketed 2017 Comprehensive Plan Amendment for those 3 elements. So that's the main motion. And then we can deliberate on that main motion. And at that time is when we need to make amendments. And we'll make very specific amendments, and we can vote on each amendment. So for example, if you want to update it to include the tip for 2018 to 2023, make a specific motion to amend the main motion to have that. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's start with that.
You want me to read this again?
No.
Please don't.
So now we're deliberating, and I'm asking for any specific amendments, and we'll vote on those amendments. Any? No?
I guess I was under the impression that there were going to be amendments. So if there are no amendments,
No, you guys have to say which amendments that you would like. So for example, I'll make a motion. I move that we include the transportation improvement projects for 2018 to 2023 as part of the capital facilities element. So I would need a second for that.
I would second that motion.
And we can deliberate that if we want to, or we can just vote.
So now that goes, it's more than those timeframes. You extended the years. So that's not the correct number of years.
So we do need to have roughly a 20-year capital list in the capital facilities plan.
Correct.
But what I understand is that you want the year to start in 2018, not in 2017. Is that correct?
That's what I thought Commissioner Anderson was after. I thought that's what you wanted.
It wasn't just that, wasn't it, that it needed to match what council is looking at, so that we're not just passing this off, or we're not all confused with all these different documents? Wasn't that the concern here?
I was hoping that a final packet would be presented that was accurate. I understand we have trust that the staff will update that. And so considering we aren't continuing the discussion, I mean, it can be left as is too, and you proceed to City Council, and then whatever outcome they have from the updates later on, they will implement, is what I heard you say, right?
Correct. City Council will have their legislative review process as well following this. I think if I could go back to the motion to amend, in my mind, I feel like it might be something that we can format differently in what you see in front of you tonight. It could be the 6-year adopted TIP, which is what Chair Collins had mentioned, the 2018 to 2023 TIP. With the remaining projects to take it to the 20-year list to be, as Cheryl mentioned, the 20-year look to be consistent with GMA. That I think that could be formatted in a way such that it would cover, we would have the accurate TIP as well as add on the remaining projects that need to be included in that table to fulfill the 20-year period. Would that be something that could clarify in a much cleaner way than what was presented tonight? I think that way we would have very clearly the TIP and then following very clearly the remaining 20-year outlook.
I like your suggestion, and I really appreciated what Commissioner Anderson said. It just reminded us that, of course we trust staff to get our changes in there, but again, it came back to me that we're here to provide advice to the City Council. We're not necessarily the ones that create the documents. We get public input as much as we can and try to voice that on to the City Council as advice. So I think I'd be happy with approving that amendment and turn it over to the staff. Okay.
Okay, I think we'll vote on the amendment. So all those in favor of approving an amendment to include the 2018 to 2023 TIP projects, and then you would add the 20-year outlook to that. So we're talking about the 6-year TIP plus the 20-year outlook. All those in favor of that amendment, say aye.
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 I think that was 1, 2, 3. Is that 4? Okay. And was it Nancy too? Okay.
Oh, I think all of us.
Did we all say aye?
Or did you?
I didn't say aye. I couldn't decide. I guess I'll say aye.
I'll say aye. Okay. Okay, so that one, well, That will pass 6-0. So we will have an amended document that includes the new TIP projects. So if there are any other amendments, then we can entertain those now.
I would, Chair Collins, I would like to note that Commissioner Garrison earlier had requested that the list of transportation, the transportation inventory be bulleted.
That's an actual amendment.
I think that would be an amendment as well.
Do you want to make that motion?
I move that we bullet the existing transportation elements in the listing.
Seconded.
Do we need to deliberate? Okay. All those in favor of putting the transportation element inventory in a bullet form instead of the paragraph form, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, and that passes 6-0. So now we have 2 amendments. And are there any others that we talked about specifically?
I call for the question.
Okay, so that would mean that we need to vote on the main amendment plus the 2, or the main motion plus the 2 amendments.
Main motion as amended.
Main motion as amended. So do we need a new motion for that?
No, I don't.
We do.
I don't think you, because the main motion will continue until all the amendments have been voted on. So, as a point of order, so I'm going to do my best to explain. The main motion remains on the table. As you amend it, those are deliberated and voted on, and you never lose the main motion. So it is the main motion as amended, and that will carry forward. It does not need to be reintroduced because it has been seconded. So once it's been seconded, you need to vote on it to, you cannot, unless you want to amend further, you still have to, you have to find the final action on the main motion.
Okay.
Sorry,
so
that's not clear.
So let's vote on the main motion as amended.
Unless there are other amendments.
Unless there are other amendments. Are there any other amendments? No? Okay. So all those in favor of approving the main motion as amended, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, and so the motion carries 6-0. So we have an approved capital facilities element, environment and conservation element, and utilities element to pass on to City Council. So I thank you for your patience this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will have our new business topic, and since Commissioner Anderson proposed this, I'll have you start us off.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. In the introduction to the city's comp plan, there's a section called Framework for Citizen Participation. And in section CP.5, it states, share information with the public about planning and development processes. So I'm just, oh, the staff is rearranging.
We're listening.
Yes. You know, we started this process quite a while ago, even before some of the new commissioners were appointed here. This is the first time this formal process has gone forward for us. So as we approach another series of these coming up, I know you're probably looking at text amendments already, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that process is. I also have, in seeing this in its totality now, the CIPs that get updated, I find this a little haphazard, what is being updated and when. It seems like without a lot of extra meetings, a lot of extra time, if the city council approves a CIP, it could be brought into the comp plan. The comp plan, as you say, is a guiding document for the future, but it's outdated all the time, in minor ways, but also in major ways when the CIPs are left out there. And we do have things, like was mentioned in public comment, The park CIP was adopted June 21st, 2016. It's referred to as the 2015 document in the comp plan. That could have been done this time around too. I know that wasn't presented as a text item, but it'd be very easy to do. So when we're talking about parks, we're talking about the school districts having updated capital plans. How valuable is this document if even the simplest ways to bring in changes by, that have been adopted by a council or a school district aren't regularly, cyclically brought into a document such as the comp plan? So I'm wondering about your ideas on that and what your process is right now as you're looking for the next docket requests and specifically the text items. And then I'd also like to hear from other commissioners if they'd like to share of what their experience has been. I think the biggest thing is for us to be transparent as a city, for us to be overt in why certain things come forward and why certain things are not. And people start reading between the lines as to why things aren't being talked about. There's so many aspects of the comp plan as you flip through. In fact, it's not very easy to even find the comp plan on our website. So that alone makes it a tough guiding document for the public to learn about when you're constantly having to go under the search bar and figure out where could this possibly be. You end up having to do a general internet search to find it. So twofold, your perspective on that, and we could also, I hope, continue this discussion into the new, the next series of meetings we have to know what to anticipate. Keep it open, make sure that public process, public participation is kept in front of us, not just leading up to a public hearing, but I think well before. It would serve us all well. And then secondly, of course, is to hear from the other commissioners as to how it went. I thank you for the earlier discussion. It's a little hard to see a document that's not updated. We do have trust that it will be updated, but it plays into, again, how do we want to do this in the future? What are the opportunities to update a document and have a complete packet brought to us and to go back and forth? Is there enough lead time? Where are ways where we can improve on the document without extending the time it takes? Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a lot in that, and I want to do my best to address as many parts of that as I can. Where I want to start, though, is you're correct. This is the first time going through this with the Planning Commission, and I think we've all learned a lot in terms of how we want to do this next year, how we want to kind of start the process, and with our eyes toward the end goal, really. And it's my first time with the city as well. Granted, I have experience prior to, and I have gone through comprehensive plan amendments before, so I have maybe a different take on it than how the city always has done it. So I want to start there by saying it's kind of, in some ways, in one regard or another, everybody's first time going through this, because with the 2015 update, we didn't do any updates in 16 for the specific reason because it had just been updated in the significant way that it was. So I think we're going to internally do a debrief. We have been along the way in trying to refine the process and how we engage the commissioners as well as the public. So I think that we may not yet be ready to say exactly how we're going to do it next time around, but I think we'll start that conversation a lot earlier, and I think engage the commission to see if you have specific ideas. So thank you, Commissioner Anderson, for bringing this to the forefront. I do think this will be really helpful. So with that being said, the comprehensive plan itself is, from my experience, is always a difficult document to talk about. One, because in many ways, it's hard for a layperson or really anybody to understand how the comprehensive plan affects their daily lives. When you see a tree being removed, or you see a house being built, or you see another structure being built, that you understand those clear and very, very concrete and tangible changes that are happening. When there's a policy change, you might not understand that or even see any effect of that for maybe 5 years, maybe longer, maybe shorter. It's a lot harder to understand how that affects development. And so that's where our job is, to do a better job of explaining this relatively complex document. It's a policy document, yes, and it's at its core a guiding stake in the ground 20 years from now. Where do we want to be? How do we get there? That's the intent of it at its core. And the steps to get there are, in theory, in that document. And if not in that document, then the genesis of it is in the document, where it might then relate to a different document, say a housing strategy plan, or say a public works standards, or transportation improvement projects list. So all of it is attempted to be packaged into this one document. So it becomes an incredibly important document that is hard to understand and has many elements to it. As you've noticed by now, it's not just transportation, it's not just housing, it's not just stormwater, it's environment, it's neighborhood character, it's it's really everything. So I always try to start there with a comprehensive plan, that it becomes sometimes an esoteric document, but we do need to do a better job of engaging people. So the fact that the document itself can be interpreted in different ways and is hard to grasp sometimes makes the amendment process even harder, because we want to keep it up to date as much as possible, but it's an incredibly vast, wide-ranging document. So in order to keep it a perfectly up-to-date document at any snapshot in time is a very difficult task. There's resource issues, there's all kinds of issues that go with that. So that's why we do have the amendment process, so that we can try to keep it as up-to-date as possible. And I think, I believe it was Commissioner O'Farrell who mentioned it, or it might have been Commissioner Anderson, that we do want to keep everything we can up to date, but there are certain limits to that. And through the annual amendment process, we try to keep it narrow. Sometimes it goes outside of that narrow band, because, as I mentioned earlier, there are tentacles that go everywhere throughout all the city documents. So it becomes a very in-depth task and a very in-depth effort to do all of that all the time. And that's why that's precisely why the GMA requires the 8-year update, because it is effectively, that's the line in the sand that they draw, the state of Washington draws, that says, at this point, you really need to update it, because you can't just rely on 8-year-old data. Maybe there's an 8-year-old inventory somewhere. Maybe there's an 8-year-old policy. You really need to, at 8 years, that's the threshold. So we try to, through the annual process, keep it up to date as much as possible, but really focus the big effort on the 8-year update. And so hopefully that comes across in what we do here. We want to try to confine it as much as possible to the degree that we think is appropriate. But in the back of our minds, we do know that we have the 8-year process, and that again starts sometimes 3 years ahead of time, sometimes 2, somewhere in that time frame. Cities and counties usually start their update process. So that's together, between the annual amendment and the periodic update, you really have, hopefully, an up-to-date document. So I've rambled on a little bit, and I feel like I may have covered parts of Commissioner Anderson's comments, but...
Yeah, let me put this on. Okay. I wanted to address one of your specific questions regarding the Parks CIP and the Parks project. So that comes under the PRO plan, the Parks Recreation Operation Open Space Plan, and that is currently being worked on. So you can guess that on the next docket, the 2018 docket, you'll have the PRO plan updates, which will include that list. So that's why you're not seeing the Park CIP as a docketed item for 2017, because it's part of the PRO plan update, which is coming. What is the schedule for that?
The PRO plan is scheduled to be adopted by City Council in spring of 2018.
Yeah, and the PRO plan is an extension of the comprehensive plan. So to answer the question regarding the park projects.
And that's a good point that Kelly makes, is that if parts of the comprehensive plan aren't specifically amended or updated in the comprehensive plan, it might relate to a document that has been updated, such as the PRO plan, or say urban forest management plan, which the city is looking at getting going on that now. We might not update any of the material or background data in, say, the environment and conservation element, but we do know that the implementing document, the UFMP, is a current valid document. So that's where it's this umbrella document, and it has specific implementation items that should be updated, but it itself needs to be updated as well. So there's this real kind of complex interplay between all the different plans that the city works with every day. And probably most importantly, the zoning map and the development regulations. Those are the ones that we try to keep the best to keep those updated and consistent. So I'll stop rambling.
Yeah, so I also wanted to answer another question about where is the comprehensive plan on our website, and I agree with you. It's very hard to find, and I think we could do a better job of getting that up and center on the community development web pages. But if you want to know where that's at, it's actually hosted where we host our Sammamish code. We have our Sammamish code, and then there is a link to the comprehensive plan. And I think we as staff can do a better job of actually having a link on the website, so you don't have to go to the code to find it and just link it right to it. So we can definitely do that. It's not easy.
I wanted to quickly, looking at the time, and just say, I learned a lot tonight, and one of the things that I learned that staff, commissions, and council are working on what the public wants. And Commissioner Anderson said something that I've been hearing from a couple of different cities. It's great that you get these things there on the dockets and all that, but get them done, okay? And that's kind of what we're doing tonight. We're trying to move things forward to get done. And as a spoiler alert, and you, Mr. McIntyre brought up the Urban Forest Management Plan, if you can see the request for proposal for that plan, it is so detailed, and it's almost doing some of the steps that we're talking about to include. They have requested the people that apply to specify how they're going to, and how many times reach out to the public, et cetera, to get them involved. It's a great document, and we, again, the spoiler alert, in, I think it's the 2nd of March, there will be an interview of the people that submitted plans or for the proposal, and probably about the 7th of August, there will be a person hired, or a firm hired, not just a person. And the firms, they're kind of high quality, the ones that have applied. And on top of that, the city council the other night voted to approve or accept the contract for the tree inventory, which is a little separate, but part of the Urban Forest Management Plan. And they needed to do that because of grant monies, and that's why they got it done, because there were some shared funds in that. So I think we're going to be impressed with what we see in the urban forest management. Okay.
If I can add one thing before, oh, sorry, I want to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
Nancy, Commissioner Anderson, we just went through this process of 2 docketed items for 2017, and at times it was painful and it was confusing and complicated, even from my perspective. I ask that you share that experience and how we as staff can maybe improve for 2018. If there are some suggestions on how we can clarify or how we could maybe go into 2018 differently, we welcome that, and I think it's always great to get that feedback. So if you have notes that you want to share, please send them our way.
Absolutely.
I'll send you mine on the columns then.
Well, I think we're talking about the overall process, right? Like, we're not talking about columns or projects or lists. What we really want to, I think what staff really wants to hear is what could we have done along the way to prevent more of some of the confusion that happened. And I think what would be most helpful for me is what can we change and what can't we change? Because I think I took a really simplistic view. When I was looking at this, I just said, okay, you know, staff wants to make a few text edits. I did the same thing for the transportation element. And I thought to myself, okay, that sounds right to me. The department wants to make some text edits, and let's move it forward. Maybe that was too simplistic. And I was also under the impression that we couldn't really change very much, that we were just changing very small things. But then when we add subtotals and do bullets and all those things, it seems to me like we are changing. So now I am a little bit confused on how much we can change. So I would like to hear, like, what can we really change and what can we really not change? Because I really thought that we shouldn't touch it at all, except for these like very small changes in numbers, or a change in a street name, or a change in a department, or a change in a person, or a change in a website. That was my impression. So that's how I feel about what we've done for the last 2 times.
And as I apologize, but point of order, I move that we extend tonight's meeting until 8:40 on or before. Did I say that right?
You said,
I second that motion if we, with the possibility of extending further if this goes on.
okay. All those in favor of extending the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say no. Okay, we're extending the meeting. So keep going. So that's pretty much what I had to say. I just think I want staff to be really clear about what we can and cannot change.
Yeah, I think we can do a better job of that with the 2018 docket. I think we'll be very clear, and it is somewhat hard as staff, because we're kind of stuck between the GMA, the rules and the regs, and then policy direction that we want either from the appointed officials or the elected officials. And then internally as well. As you can tell, we're working with different departments. Some of those departments have very technical items that they deal with that we're not technical experts in, but our value is in the process. So I think we can really help you when we come with the 2018 docket in terms of more clearly laying out what the options are, I think.
I think I agree with the chair that's a big question of mine. I think I go overboard sometimes trying to change too much. I have the opposite point of view, and I don't know why we're here if we're just here to edit. And I think you would need an English major rather than somebody than a planning commission if that's really what you wanted. So if you don't want our opinions and you don't want us to listen to the public and give you back an opinion or about it, then I don't know what our purpose is.
Well, I think our purpose is really to focus on the policy and to make sure that we look at these really big, broad things. And so I think it's really important to make edits and always improve a document, but I also think we should really keep our eye on the broader policies. So.
With all respect, and I'm the newest member of this commission, so I may not know what I'm talking about, but I have to agree with that. I didn't come into this role thinking that I was going to be doing like grammar work, or I know that when we had the meeting on this the first time, the Public Works said, "Oh yeah, I made some cut and paste errors," and I get that happens. I've certainly done that myself, but I think if you're looking for suggestions on the next round of these things, those things I don't think should be presented to us. I think we should get a clean document so that we are actually making sort of substantive recommendations or substantive opinions on it. And I'm concerned about this, although I do understand it, the issue of timing and the staff resources, and that if we get off track, the whole train kind of falls apart. Because I don't want to be just a rubber stamp up here. I mean, I think if there really are problems, they need to be addressed. And I don't know how much of that can be avoided by not having us dig into the minutia, and we can't understand the document because of the way the red lines are done, or because there's not subtotals, whatever the thing is. I mean, if those sort of structural issues are removed and we're really dealing with the substance, then I think having a tight timeline where we basically have one chance to make edits and then we're talking about the final version next time, that makes more sense to me. But I think we seem to get bogged down in a whole meeting of minutia that I don't think are substantive or necessarily germane to the whatever it is we're talking about. So that if we could sort of take that off the table, then we would have a much more meaningful role, and then perhaps we'd be more comfortable recommending a document, knowing that there are experts such as yourselves and then the City Council who are going to potentially see something slightly different, but we've actually had a meaningful
I think the problem with the last two things is that they weren't intended for us to make policy recommendations. So that was the problem, is that we were only supposed to look at the text amendments. We weren't supposed to look, we can't change the policy on the comp plan at this point, not until the periodic update.
Oh, yeah, I guess I'm not terribly concerned about policy, but like if suddenly there's a table that doesn't match.
Well, I think what staff was trying to do with all the text edits and all the corrections was to be transparent and show that these are the edits that we're making. They're very small. So I think that's why we had to see that. But then it sort of ballooned into this thing where everybody started making edits, and I don't think that was the purpose. And so really the problem with the elements is that we can't change the policy. So our purpose as the commission, then we end up doing all these little edits, but that doesn't feel substantial.
Right. Well, no, and I really appreciate the red line versions of the documents. That certainly helps me understand what was and where we're going. But when the red lines are the numbers and some of these things, the entire number's not redlined. There's just one or two of the digits are redlined, and the other ones are added on the front and the back, and it becomes nearly incomprehensible. So those kinds of things, we don't have to then be confused about how many miles of pipe there are and even bother talking about it if that stuff is clear. So that's really my only.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate those. I think. To build on Shanna's comments, I think when you came on board, it was a timing thing. The first couple things that you dealt with were specifically non-substantive things. And so if say you had joined back at the end of last year, we would have dealt with substantive like sign code and housing strategy, which actually less housing strategy, but or housing element, sorry. But there will be items as you are on the commission longer that we really will want substantive input and are different animals. There's just, these are different beasts in some way that I think I've really tried to emphasize that the comp plan amendment, the annual amendment process is a very distinct thing that we deal with as planners that is confusing to everybody across the state. I've done these across the state. Everybody has the same exact concerns. It's really hard. I try really hard to explain that it is a different beast, and it's hard to look at it in such a narrow kind of myopic view of it. So I totally understand that, and I think as we move forward and into other projects that we have coming. Whether that's the urban forest management plan or other types of documents, I think that's when you can really have that feeling of affecting policy and affecting change through these policy documents. So I just want to note that I think it's, in this case, it might be a timing issue on, which is why you might feel that.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, if our role is editors, that's fine. I guess that's just not what I expected. So
yeah.
No, I don't want your role to be editor.
No, we don't either, because when it comes to some of the heavier documents like urban forest or like housing strategy plan, we do really want the heavy lift done by Planning Commission with substantive policy input. So that will come, and hopefully this process doesn't bog you down or get you depressed about the role, because I hope, I do want it to be engaging, and I don't want you to feel like it's a rubber stamp. It's just that this is a different animal, and it's this being the comp plan amendments. It's hard, and everyone goes through the exact same frustration with it. I fully acknowledge that across the state, probably across every growth management state. There's 13 of them in the country. Probably every single one of them has the exact same issue with comp plan amendment processes. It's just a very confusing and frustrating process, and I've apologize. I try to make it, clear, but it's not, and I apologize. So when we go to the 2018 docket, maybe I'll reiterate some of those things and just try to hopefully not make it a frustrating process. So my apologies.
Anything?
Can we extend for 5 minutes?
Sure. Go ahead, make a motion.
Motion made? 5
Second.
minutes? 8:45?
All those in favor of extending the meeting 5 more minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. We'll amend the meeing for 5 more minutes. Go ahead, Commissioner
Well, thanks
Anderson.
for the time tonight to talk about it. I've been able to look at comp plans for many years and understand the process. I think I'd have to say it's confusing to some, but I think it is an overriding directional document that isn't supposed to be real confusing, is supposed to be clear, and when you read it, and I think Commissioner Garrison has referenced it a number of times, saying, look at the vision, look at the... So that is understandable along the way. And now when we enter into amendments, what I think needs to be done is it can't be haphazard in terms of changing a couple words here, changing a couple graphs here. Give us source documents, tell us where it comes from, when the city council had made that, we're done. CIPs are updated, oh, we can't do the park CIP because we're waiting for the ProPen, done. You can anticipate that if the city council has a regular cycle of things that they're looking at every year, that we're probably every fall going to ask, well, what about that CIP? Are we going to update it again next year? Some of the more significant policy changes, I assume you have a checklist in your planning meetings that says, does this rise to a comp plan update? But I would avoid the wordsmithing, and then we will too. But once you enter it, we do too.
Yeah.
Because most of the document does get outdated pretty quickly. We wait for that 8-year update to make the more substantial changes, and one of the more substantial changes could be to stop having to duplicate CIPs into the document itself. This isn't the time to address that, I understand. But many other cities, when I look at their comp plans, don't go to this degree of detail. It's still broad in its scope. That's the intention of a comp plan, is broad in scope. I think the danger in our comp plan is it got so in the weeds in areas where it really didn't have to.
Thank you for that. I think what I see I was not involved in the update of the comprehensive plan in 2015, but what I see in it, because I have been involved in other comprehensive plan updates, what I see in ours is there was an attempt made to draw a line between the policy side of it and the data side of it. And that's what you see with the way the document is structured. There's the first volume, I'll call it, and then the second volume. And the second volume has the data, all the real nitty-gritty details. The first part is the policy side. And I think that I think that was a recognition of there's a lot in some of these elements, so let's move that to either what quote unquote an appendix or something of that nature, and then leave the real substantive policy side. So I think that was an attempt to reflect what I've been saying, which is it's this broad but also specific document, and so I think that's you hit on the exact, I think, complication of where we're at today. Is we have a lot of this data that does go out of date real quick, and then there's just a lot of it, and there's a lot of we're down in the weeds on a lot of these things. That I will implore you to take a look at the policy side too, because I think that helps. And Commissioner Garrison has mentioned this in, I think it was last meeting, that there are a lot of really great policies and a really great vision statement, and those are the things that people typically think of when they think of a comprehensive plan, and those are the guiding light kind of statements. And then you go into the volume 2 and you get bogged down in some of the details. So my take on it is that it was an attempt to break it apart. And I think that was a good attempt. I think when we go to the update, we'll want to take a look at that in more detail on what that means on the functionality of the plan, because it still has to be functional. So that's my own personal take on that.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I just had one last question. The procedures for the amendment of the comp plan, where does that stand?
So if you recall, I believe it was June 1st, the Planning Commission did make a recommendation, and the Title 24A was presented to you, and there was a conversation about the biennial update that was not recommended by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission felt more comfortable with the annual process. So with that change, and I was on vacation that day, so I'm going off of what I've looked at on the videos, but that was the substantive change made to that, and that has been postponed a little bit, just in recognition of some of the other things we have going on. So it won't go to City Council until I think it's a little later this year.
Yes.
I think it's the either later half of the later part of this year or early 2018. I'll have to take a look at the advanced calendar on that, but I think it's just there's a lot. The city has a lot going through the pipeline right now, and my analogy of the balloon, there's only so much space in that. So that is the Planning Commission has completed their action on that, but it is waiting for City Council review. So the good point about that is that the 2018 amendments will be done in the same manner as we did them this year. There will be no changes to the rules.
If we wanted a description of the process, where do we go to look?
The process to amend the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
So that's Title 24 in the Sammamish Municipal Code. And
So if we go to Title 24, that'll be very clear in there, and we could set up maybe a calendar for ourselves to understand it?
So one of the reasons why we did want to amend Title 24 and propose the Title 24A is because it is a very confusing title. It has a lot of outdated references. It has a lot of unnecessary process. It was actually
What we looked at.
Right, correct, yeah. So I don't want to rehash too much of what was looked at, but at the core of Title 24 as it exists today, it was adopted in 2000-ish to allow the city to adopt its first comprehensive plan. So there was a lot that's in there that is actually no longer applicable at all. So we are trying to get that through to fix it. So if you were to go to it today, it is probably going to be confusing, and it's not.
But it is the rules that we have for now.
It's not going to be super helpful, but it is the rules that we have on the books and the rules that we are reviewing these comprehensive plan amendments under. So maybe we should talk offline on that one. I can do a little bit of a better job of explaining some of the intricacies of it and deadlines, because really the deadline is September 30th of every year is the end of the application period. And then toward the end of that year, you go through the docket setting process, and then you go through the legislative review. So that's the basic idea behind it, that the 2018 docket that's coming we'll finalize the docket toward the end of this year, and then as 18 comes around in January through mid 2018, we'll go through the same process that we just went through with those items that were docketed. So so that's essentially what it is.
Under current projects, under community development, so if you go to the community development department and then you go under current projects, there is a web page on the comprehensive plan amendment process. So I encourage you to review that. If there's things that you think need to be further clarified, please email them to us, because if you have those questions, I'm pretty sure the public has the same questions. And it is a web page on our website. I can also send you a link tomorrow morning, so you have.
Why don't you send us a link? That would be helpful.
Okay.
And actually, I'm remembering that we need to do the public comment period, so we need to have public comment on the item that we just discussed. So I'll see you. Okay. All right. So I will open the public comment period and ask if anyone would like to speak tonight on the item that we just talked about. Nope. Okay. Very good. With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:48.